Hey everybody, it's your professor Lee Howard. I'm here to give you chapter 13 notes as I promised. Hope this works. I've never done it before, so before I start, let me first remind you that pretty much everything is due next class, April 30th. So please do have your case study journals ready to go and also any of your chapter notes so we can be ready for the final. So I'll go ahead with chapter 13. I'm doing it in 3 sections, so here we go. A famous journalist in the early 1900s by the name of Walter Lippmann, in his book Public Opinion, proposed the idea that mass media have a profound effect on people. He really thought it was, more profound than it probably was, but because he was, sort of really one of the key journalists of the time, people sort of took him seriously and thought that he was probably correct. Unfortunately, the theory, which was summed up by Yale psychologist Harold Lasswell, really gave too much power to the media. It somehow gave the idea that public opinion was something that the media could sort of inject their opinion, and their opinion would come out automatically without much conjecture or much debate. But the presumption that people are passive creatures who absorb information uncritically, of course, has been proven very, very wrong. The fact is that people have always been skeptical of the media, and there's very good reason for that because, very often the media are one-sided. And you have to, if you're on the other side, you have to say, okay, well, that's their point of view, but I have my own. So the idea of media influence being immensely powerful was first dealt its biggest blow by sociologist Paul Lazarsfeld, who did a study of voter behavior in Erie County, Pennsylvania in 1948. He found that friends and acquaintances really had much more of an effect on voting than editorials in newspapers, magazines, or radio stations. So that created a new wave of rethinking media scholarship, and there was another group that came out that kind of course, went the other way and said that really media has a minimalistic effect on people's thought processes. The theory there was that there was a two-step process. There was a step where the media had an initial effect on public opinion, but then it became filtered through other key people such as merchants, clergy, teachers, and politicians. So the original facts might have been presented, but then they were interpreted by key people in the community, and that they were really the ones that had much more of an effect than the media. The idea was really that media do not tell people what to think, but they often do tell people what to think about. And I think that's a much better idea than the fact that the media tell people what to think and how to think. Minimalists as well saw a tendency of media to lull people into a passive state, which they called narcotizing dysfunction, which basically was the idea that by talking something to death, there'll be a well-informed electorate, people who vote, but not necessarily people who are really involved in what's going on. And that has been proven to be kind of true, but of course it's not an automatic thing. Each person is different. Anyway, Elizabeth Noel Newman, a German scholar, developed another idea of the media called cumulative effects theory, and basically she said that when that messages are repeated, and that part of the problem is that because so many messages are sort of the same, there's a lack of diversity that works against a robust consideration of many issues. So she really was a Debbie Downer on the media, and thought the media actually had a negative effect on people. And her view was sort of raised doubts about the effectiveness of a marketplace of ideas when some ideas are shut out of the marketplace. And that means the majority views are amplified, and when that happens, there's less chance of scrutiny and evaluation. So the idea was that if the media often say the same thing, people will become kind of sleepy and not really look at issues, especially ones that are repeated, because it just becomes an accepted truth. There was a question about what people value in life. Scientists acknowledge that much of this taking in a value happens early through socialization with the family, friends, and neighbors. We tend to value what other people value. But of course, kids watch TV, they listen to radio, they spend a lot of time on the internet. And the good news is that media largely reflect the values of people they serve. If someone's spouting Nazi propaganda, he's probably not going to stay on network TV for very long. So the effect of people, with profoundly different views is not probably going to be taken into account very much, because those folks simply don't have the amplifying effect of being allowed to have media, especially the major media like TV, very much. At least that was in the era of TV. We're in a different era now, right? When pretty much anyone has an idea and can throw it up on the internet. But back in the 50s, we have to remember that also lifestyles have an effect on people. And back in the 50s, people were working in factories a lot and getting up early. They didn't have a lot of time in the morning to see a TV show or read a newspaper. So back then, really it was the afternoon that was the key, and the evening. And that's why afternoon papers did really well back in the 1950s when there was a lot of factories. But as towns got more and more white-collar jobs, newspapers started catering more to the morning folks, people that got up at 7 and maybe didn't have to get into work until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And those people had, a lot more money than the factory folks, and so newspapers started catering to that. So I think we always have to remember that the media cater to the people that are paying the freight, right? So if they find they're going to make more money off folks that want an afternoon paper, that's where they're going to go, and then later on they transfer it to other means. Similarly, advertising dollars switched from newspapers to TV once they realized more people were moving that way. Anyway, a lot of this changed in the 1980s, and that's when the morning papers started coming to the fore. Again, media goes with the audience, and the afternoon papers died off in a lot of the cities around America. On the other hand, media also affect lifestyles, perhaps most tellingly keeping young people in the loop on subjects that once would have been banned at the kitchen table in the 1950s. Coverage of presidential affairs and access to a wide range of previously off-limit materials allowed what's called intergenerational eavesdropping. The idea that children can now sort of eavesdrop much more easily on adult topics than they ever were before. This kind of stopped the whole idea of parents protecting their kids from embarrassing, sensitive issues, and it also reduced the distance between children and their parents. But of course, it also made it harder for adults to keep the line between childhood and adulthood that they once thought was a really important part of life. Kids are much more exposed to sex, violence, and other realities of life than they ever were. And the ubiquity of television and the internet has really accelerated the breakdown of other traditional barriers as well. Certainly accelerating things like the women's movement and moving other issues that have been taboo, including likely gay rights. So that's the end of the first part. We'll go on to the next one.